Hello, and welcome to today's Microsoft Teams for Education virtual event. And we're going to be talking about Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams upgrade and the process of transitioning your users between the products. My name is Nick Smith. I'm a Principal Program Manager in the Microsoft Teams team. And I've been working with a number of different educational institutions, helping them to drive Teams usage. Part of that conversation is transitioning their existing Skype for Business users to Microsoft Teams. And I want to share with you today some of the key points, key resources that we've been able to use to complete that transition. We only have half an hour today, so I'm going to be talking about the strategy and tools that you can use. If you want deep learning and walkthroughs of client experience and all the configuration capabilities, I will be pointing you to a number of different resources that are available for you to consume offline as you are planning your journey. So first of all, why upgrade to Teams? I always like to say that Teams should be a pull. We should be pulling users to be coming to you saying, "Hey, I want to use Teams as my primary way of conversing," rather than pushing them off the old system. And we've actually done a lot in Teams to make sure that that pull happens. We've introduced advanced features and capabilities that allow you to do more than what we had in Skype for Business Online. We're also rapidly introducing new capabilities, sometimes every 2 weeks into the product, that give them enhanced, greater capability, enhanced reliability, and a richer experience. We've also made sure that we modernize the user experience. There are a number of challenges that we had seen with previous architectures with Skype for Business, server, online, consumer, that we're able to address at a larger scale in the cloud and provide a great user experience that aligns with how people want to work in the workplace today and the new way in which people want to collaborate. And so what we're doing is we're taking a lot of the capabilities that had previously been in Skype for Business and merging it with the ways in which people want to communicate. Things like persistence of chat rather than a session that you converse real time, you close the window, and then where did it go? We've also done a lot of design work to improve the overall performance of the system, to improve the reliability, and to make sure that meeting join is much easier. Across all of these, we've made vast improvements, and our customers are seeing those. And that is also something that is having people come to us and say, "Hey, how quickly can I get to Teams? What is the process? How do I get there?" Teams has also been the fastest growing business app in Microsoft history. It's already used at over 500,000 companies, 91 of the Fortune 100, and many of them have already gone large on it. Over the course of the next 2 years, we're going to be working with many of those customers to help them complete their Skype for Business to Teams upgrade. And we'll continue to iterate in Teams to make that experience better. When we first announced that Skype for Business was going to be upgrading into Teams about 2 years ago, we actually went out and we published a roadmap that talked about the features of Teams and the feature of Skype for Business that were available in the market. And we talked about the number of features that we we're going to be bringing into Teams. Over the course of those 2 years, we have delivered a tremendous amount of features into Teams that weren't there at launch. So if you've kind of heard about this, you looked at Teams, maybe you looked at it a while ago, but it was missing a number of features, please look at this list again because there's a number of things that we've improved into the product. In fact, there are a number of things on this list that we never even offered in Skype for Business Online that were more Skype for Business on-prem features that we've been able to architect and introduce into Teams. So we're really working to making sure that you get the complete experience with Teams of the features that you had previously in Skype. Now, I don't want to say that we have feature parity because there are certain things that we do different in Teams that no longer equate one-to-one with what we have for Skype for Business because we're doing things a little bit differently or a little bit better. But by and large, the biggest feature sets we've been able to deliver. There are a few things that we know are holding a couple of companies back. And so we've also already put out a blog in which we've announced what our plans for Skype for Business, the Teams are, And we've detailed a couple of those additional gaps that are coming into the product. Things like enhanced 911 support. Speaking of that blog, here's a little bit more about the blog that we released late July. And essentially what we did is we said, hey, we've been working on Skype for Business, the Teams upgrade, for the past few years. We've been talking about it for a few years. And we've gotten to the point now where we have the majority of features in Teams. And so we have announced the Skype for Business online retirement date. And we actually gave you 2 years of notice. So if you're using Skype for Business Online, you can continue to use it, but we encourage you to start thinking about your journey to Microsoft Teams, how you're going to adopt it, how you're going to get there, because we plan on retiring that service on July 31st, 2021. It's a full 2 years notice. A couple of things that I do want to call out about this is that this is specifically to Skype for Business Online. If you are running Skype for Business Server, which is the on-premise version, or if you're working with Skype Consumer, those are not affected. We have not put out a retirement date for those. Those are going to continue to be supported. We're going to be continuing to work with those. Another thing to call out is that many of you who may have deployed Skype for Business as a phone system and have a number of third-party IP phones, we realize that you've made the investment in that infrastructure and the investment in that hardware. And that even though you're moving to Teams, you still need to use that hardware in order to make phone calls. And so what we have announced is that we will continue to support the gateway, allowing those third-party IP phones that were designed to connect to Skype. They'll still be able to connect into Teams, and they'll still be able to make calls all the way through 2023, which is about the same time that many of those devices are going end of life. So we will continue to support that and allow you to use those even against the Teams backend. I mentioned a little bit earlier a couple of features that we know are coming to Teams that some people may be waiting for from Skype. We do have a plan on delivering dynamic 911, shorter retention periods of chat, Teams and Skype consumer interop, and then we're also working with a number of partners on making sure that we have contact center integrations and compliance recording. We have found through our survey with many customers that these are the things with both that we've already delivered and that are on this list that will help unblock people from getting to Teams. And with that, almost everyone can make it into Teams. So with that said, what do the Teams upgrade paths look like? How do you get there? Just a couple things that I want to make sure that we set from a terminology standpoint. We have a number of different modes that you can go through and configure via an admin policy and assign to your organization or users that define what your experience is between Skype for Business and Teams. By default, if you have made no other changes, you're probably in something called Islands mode. And what Islands mode is means that Teams is an island and Skype for Business is an island. And the two don't communicate right now. And so that means that if I send a chat in Skype for Business, as long as I'm still in Islands mode, that is always going to land in Skype for Business for whoever I'm sending it to within your organization. If I send a chat message in Teams, that's going to land in Teams. That's the meaning of Islands mode. You have two different applications that both provide somewhat overlapping features and functionality. This also means that they have the ability of scheduling Skype meetings and Teams meetings. Now, the reason why we have Islands mode by default is because when we think about the strategy of wanting to upgrade users from Skype for Business to Teams, we don't just want to change their experience completely overnight. We want them to have the ability to go through and become familiar and build trust with Teams. And that's where we want to work with that, have them working with Teams that eventually turns into that pull motion that I talked about earlier of users coming to you and saying, hey, you know what? I really want to use Teams for all these communications. How can I just make this my only application? That's going to be your indicator that it's time to start making that the upgrade and transition. And so what we do is we want to spend the time in which we're in islands going through and making sure that everyone who is using Skype is getting introduced to Teams, that they're building familiarity and capability. And once we see that our usage level and our adoption within those departments is the same, is when we will look at configuring the policy so that we can upgrade everyone to Teams and start delivering all these messages into Teams. There are a number of different modes that can be configured based upon the transition path that you want to take and whether or not you are an on-prem customer, a hybrid customer, or online. If you are strictly Skype for Business Online, our recommendation is that you go from island mode, you get saturation, and then you go to Teams mode as quickly as you can. What that does is it helps to reduce user confusion. It helps to reduce kind of the help desk churn, and it gets everyone into Teams using it as a collaborative platform at the same time. You can assign these policies to users. You can assign them at the organization. So if you wanted to test this within your IT department, you could assign that policy to a couple of users to test. One thing I want to call out is that you can have different modes assigned to different users. And so if you have islands mode assigned to one user and you have a mode like Teams only assigned to another user, what will happen is that we will redirect chat messages to whatever platform is necessary based upon the configuration of the receiving user. And I'll tell you what that means in just a second. So the destination mode that we want to get to is called Teams only. And what this does is it essentially goes through and on the services in the back end, it will go through and it will redirect any chat or calling messages. And it will actually deliver those to Teams instead of Skype for Business. So if you had a user that was Teams only, but the rest was in islands, any message sent from Skype for Business or Teams would show up in Teams. They would be able to reply back and it would go to the originating system. But this is something we have called interop. And interop allows us to make sure that we connect the two systems in the time in which you're going through the upgrade. But this is also where we see the most amount of questions and slightly different experience. And even from a user perspective, we'll prompt them with a message saying, hey, this conversation is happening with a Teams user or Skype for Business user. We recommend that you both switch to Teams to get the greatest capabilities. You can certainly do this at a user level or departmental level, but our recommendation is that as you go through, you get saturation, you go ahead and upgrade the enterprise to Teams at the same time. And that way it limits the amount of time that you're in this interrupt mode. And it also reduces confusion from your users and help desk in terms of when I send a message, where does it go? Some other things that we do when you set someone to Teams only mode. So not only do we redirect all chat and calling to arrive in Teams, we also go through and look at any meetings. We will remove the ability to schedule a new Skype for Business meeting from Outlook, and they will only have the ability to schedule Teams meetings. And we will also go through and look at their calendar and any Skype for Business meetings that that user has scheduled using the Skype for Business meeting add-in will automatically be updated with coordinates to join that as a Teams meeting. So we'll go ahead and take care of that for you in the back end. And what that means is that when you go to join a meeting, you'll start to join Teams meetings and meetings will be scheduled as Teams meetings. Now, the one exception to this is that if you are a user and you are joining someone else's meeting that has not yet been upgraded to Teams, or is maybe using Skype for Business in a different organization, they will still have their join Skype for Business link. What we will do is we will leave the Skype for Business binaries installed. And when you click on that, we will actually launch the Skype for Business client. We'll allow them to join the meeting as the Skype for Business client, but they'll have limited functionality in Skype for Business. It actually won't let them send any new chat messages outside of the context of a meeting. And it actually won't let them see their contact list because we've migrated all of that to Teams. They will also get a warning in the Skype for Business client when they first launch it that says you've been upgraded to Teams, go and communicate there. So we do as much as we can within the client experience to make sure that they know that they've been upgraded and they should go communicate in Microsoft Teams. The other thing that we do is we go and we look at the data that had previously been in Skype for Business and we transition that into Teams. So we'll go and find any of the existing contacts and federated contacts, and we will put that into chat underneath their contact section, where they'll get all of the contacts and all the contact groups that they previously had. So we will go through and do a refresh, make sure all of that information is within Teams as they get migrated to Teams only mode. So very quickly, who's done this? We have a number of different customers, enterprise and education, that have already gone through this. We have customers of all different sizes, whether it be a very small institution or fairly large institutions that are already in the process of doing the upgrade or have already completed. What we have here is the University of South Florida, who was gracious enough to give me a quote. They recently completed their Skype for Business to Teams upgrade. And what they found is that as they were deploying Teams, they very quickly had more users on Teams than they did for Skype for Business. And I see this very common within within education customers, where Skype for Business is used on the staff faculty side, many times in the administrative units of the education business, but it's not used broadly enough in which it's being used by all students or it's being used by the entire community. And so we see very quickly that Teams growth has outpaced the adoption of Skype. And that's when we know that we want to start looking at when do we set the policies in order to do the upgrade. One thing that I want to call out is that if I have 1,000 users who are active on Skype and 1,000 users who are active on Teams, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the same 1,000 users. And I'll show you a tool in just a moment to help you identify how close those user sets are. But as you can see, the University of South Florida went through this. They went through their Teams deployment. They saw that they could reduce confusion and that they had already kind of introduced Teams into many of those departments. So they went ahead and set a notify on the Skype for Business client saying, hey, Teams is going to be upgraded in the next 30 days. They set that switch. They sent out emails. They communicated it. There was 30 days came. They set the policy for the organization to go to Teams only, and they were upgraded. And in fact, this process went so smoothly that they really didn't have too many support calls, more of, hey, where do I get Teams, for those that hadn't actually had Teams deployed to their machine yet. But as you can see, they had a very smooth experience and it allowed them to move forward with Teams and go ahead and be done with supporting that additional application with the overlapping workload. So what does the journey from Skype for Business to Teams look like? So if you're already using Teams, then you're in that period of coexistence in which you have Skype for Business and Teams, and you're in islands mode. And as we talked about, that is using side by side. When you're at this point, what you want to do is you want to plan your upgrade for Teams only. You want to look at who your users are for Skype for Business. Have they been introduced to Teams? If they have, then are we achieving the same levels of usage in those departments? And then we know that we can go through and do the upgrade. So there's a number of things that you want to plan. What are your dates that you want to do? How long do you want to notify users that you're going to be upgrading from Skype for Business to Teams beforehand? What type of communications do you want to put out? Most of this change is about change management rather than, hey, we're just going to go and replace one client with the other. And so that's what you really want to think about. But once you get Teams introduced, they're really going to know what Teams feels like. They're going to know of the advantages of Teams, and it makes the process a lot easier. If you have a more complex deployment, or if you have on-premise or hybrid, there are some other steps that you can take, these other policies in which you can move workloads into Teams. So if you wanted to use Teams just for collab, but not use chat, you could configure that. Or if you want to introduce collab in meetings, you can do that. Again, those are for the more complex. if you have on-premise or hybrid. The majority of customers that we work with are completely in Skype for Business Online using Teams, and that's where we suggest going from islands directly to Teams only. If you have not yet started using Teams, then we want to get started now. Like I said, we have 2 years between now and the end of service date, but we want to make sure that you are currently going through planning your deployment and getting things set up. So start by going and envision how you want to do teamwork within your organization. Identify some pilots, identify some use cases where people have an existing business need that they're trying to solve, and introduce Teams there. And then start to deploy Teams and grow your usage. Really start with those people that are going to become your champions. And you'll see that Teams starts to grow fairly rapidly. And that's when you get into the area of coexistence, which is what we had on the first slide. And you continue to grow and adopt Teams, and then you get into planning your Teams only mode once you reach that saturation level in which you know the people who are using Skype for Business have been introduced to Teams and that they're going to be comfortable with what that upgrade means. So how do you know which users are your Skype for Business users and which users are your Teams users, and whether or not there's a good enough overlap? The good news is that we have something in the Office 365 usage dashboard called Microsoft 365 Usage Analytics. It's something that you can go and turn on for your tenant. It will load all of the usage in your tenant, and it will give you a Power BI report. And these Power BI reports are very, very powerful because they allow you to filter down to different levels. I'm showing you a screenshot that has a whole bunch of kind of randomized data because I don't want to be sharing anyone's email address or anything else. But a couple things that I want to point out here. You can get this usage and analytics report for any Office 365 workload, right? Which is great because that means that we can look at what our Teams user activity is, and we can look at what our Skype for Business user activity is. And that allows us to see, are they the same users, or is there a similar number of users who are using that? So you get this report for all Office 365 workloads. The next thing is that you get to go and see who your top departments are by usage. And so this, as long as you have department configured in Active Directory, it will pull this information. And I can see that there are some departments that use the workload more than others based upon the size of the box. When I am planning my Teams rollout, and I'm planning it specifically for the upgrade from Skype for Business to Teams, I know I want to go and target those larger boxes because those are my larger amounts of usage. And what we'll see is we'll actually see Skype for Business usage start to tail off. So you can see this for Skype for Business, you know you need to target it. And then you can see those boxes grow in Teams so that they're relatively the same amount of usage as what you had for Skype for Business. And this calls it out. The next thing that this really helps you with is a lot of times people say, okay, I know that this is being used within a big department, but who are my top users in that department? Through the magic of Power BI, you can go through and click on that department. And you can actually, in the bottom, have a filtered list that shows who your top users are and what pieces of the technology they are using. So in the case of, hey, we're doing Skype for Business, the Teams upgrade, here are the ones that need a little bit more assistance because they're the ones who are actively using the system a lot more. They're the ones that you want to target and say, here's the advantage of Teams. Make sure that they're really introduced into Teams, because they will also become your champions within the department making that transition. So this is the tool that you will really use as you're going through to say, am I ready? Is this department ready to make the jump? Because what you'll see is that you will see either the equal amount of Teams usage to Skype for Business in there, or you'll see Skype for Business usage tailing off and Teams usage in those departments going up. And that's when you know that you're ready to make the change. So this has been a very high level conversation, but I want to make sure that I also give you the links that you need to go for that more technical conversation. What are the policies that I can do? What is the client experience like? What do I need to do from an end user change management adoption? Unfortunately, we didn't have enough time in this call to cover all of it, but I want to make sure that you have access to these resources. So first of all, we have a great resource out at aka.ms/Skype to Teams. This is an entire page dedicated to how people can make the transition from Skype to Teams. It will give you links to videos that detail the entire technical process, all the different admin capabilities, what interop looks like. But it also gives you a lot of different adoption resources that help you to go through, how do I plan this? Who are my project stakeholders? What are we doing for technical user readiness? How are we making sure that it's out there? And how are we continuing to grow and build our champions with teams that not only helps you do the Skype for Business to Teams upgrade, but puts the infrastructure in place to really have the champions to drive Teams usage within your organization. So I highly recommend that you go and you check out these resources. It will give you information about things that are coming into Teams, how to structure these, what sample timelines look like, and what the technical information looks like if you are the IT administrator. And then we also have a number of other links in here that will help you with Teams adoption. Because like I said, the first part of doing this upgrade is to get Teams adoption out there. So lots of great resources. If you are an adoption specialist, I highly recommend that you go and check out the Teams Adoption Toolkit. This has a number of different videos, a number of different posters, a number of different resources. You can go through and look at, hey, how do you go and get Teams deployed? How do you drive user awareness? What are some posters, email samples, other things that you can send out? And then along the side, we also have lots of things about, we talked about Skype to Teams. We have Teams training so that you can get a foundation in what Teams is, why it's different from Skype for Business, why we made certain decisions. Teams is also so much more than what Skype for Business was. I want to make sure that I stress this. If you look at Teams as just a Skype for Business replacement, then you're going to look at it and say, well, why did they do certain things? But if you think about Teams as, not only are we bringing the Skype for Business workloads into it from a private chat functionality, from a meetings perspective, but when you overlay it with the way in which people can collaborate, the way in which people can co-edit documents, the way in which people can work out in the open, and then the architecture of Teams and the user experience of Teams makes so much more sense. And so I really want you guys to look at, not only is Teams just a replacement for that capability, but it's so much more, and you're getting a lot more that you can do with the product. I did talk about a few Teams roadmap items, and so that's where you can go and see Teams roadmap at aka.ms/Teams roadmap. And then another fantastic resource is Success with Teams. This is a website that you can go to that pretty much kind of gives you at the beginning a guidepost of what is your role, what are you trying to do, and it helps you to navigate the wealth of information that we have out there about Microsoft Teams and gets you into the resources that are most valuable for what it is you're trying to do. Whether that's I'm trying to find out how to do the upgrade, or technical policy management of Teams, or where do I find end user training. Success with Teams is the place that will take you through and show you all those different capabilities and help you to navigate that information. So I highly suggest you go and check out these resources. They're going to be very helpful in having you go through the process of actually doing the upgrade from Skype for Business to Teams. With that, thank you very much. I appreciate your time today. And please go out, check out those resources. Based upon your role, they'll give you the technical specifics that you need for policy configuration or end user change management adoption during the upgrade. Thank you very much.